um, starting point to say that it's like we feel like there's value here. We don't entirely understand specifically what that might be, but also understand that we really won't know until we start doing the work. And I think for every one of us who participated in coaching, you realize pretty quickly in that you might go in with these expectations about this is how this is going to work out, or these are the things that I want to get out of it. And as soon as you start actually working with a personal coach, you realize that there's other work here that's important that you want to be working on that has real value that you might not have even realized was important to you.
I'd love to ask on the kind of flip side of Jim's question. So I'm hearing loud and clear that participation and kind of usage, that's a real quantitative piece to this that will be valuable. Are there other quantitative pieces, like off the top of your head?
I don't. Well, you may have to tell me
what
will you be able to track? I mean, because
if you, but getting back to
maybe there's like some sort of survey data from the participants that qualifies in some way, like that they found it valuable, or that they I'm even trying to think about like what it is that we would be able to ask survey participants to say, like what's meaningful here. You know, it's a meaningful use of your time. It's important to your professional development. You it met your expectations, or it met your expectations in ways that you didn't realize going into it, or it had unexpected benefits.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of questions we often ask is do you want to continue with the coaching?
Yeah. Yeah.
And would you recommend your coach to somebody else?
Yeah, those are great ones, yeah.
Those are two, because those generally say, because maybe not, no, I don't care. That sends the value signal. Right?
Yeah, I think I hadn't even been thinking about the terms of like your individual relationship with your specific coach. I was thinking more sort of broad spectrum about coaching. But you're totally right that would you recommend your coach? Yeah. And it may be a measure of, it's like, do you feel like your coach is a good fit for you?
Okay, so the fit piece.
And then I'm hearing too, and this is good from a larger perspective. Do you feel like this thing called coaching is effective?
Yeah.
And what's effective about it?
Yeah.
That would be more of an open-ended question, and maybe we can gather from that things that can. Do we want to roll? Are you rolling already?
Yeah, I'm rolling a little to test it.
This is incredible because
how's my hair look?
Where's hair and makeup?
Amazing.
Yeah. I just had a passport photo taken yesterday, and I had to eat a cupcake afterwards. I was so depressed when I was like, oh my God. It's like I'm like a haggard old person.
No, they have specially designed those cameras, I think, to make everything
really be horrifying.
Terrible.
Yeah.
I literally, my passport, it looks like it's a mug shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, this is so helpful because we do have like our process built out, but really what we're hoping to do from you is just kind of hear, like, in an ideal world, if any type of reporting was available to you, what would that be? And these pieces around like things being uncovered that were maybe unexpected, like the combination between the quantitative stuff and the qualitative stuff is really helpful. And what we're going to do after this is go back to our already drafted surveys and start making adjustments based on what we heard today, and then we'll share with you kind of a draft of that more quarterly robust questionnaire for your feedback.
Yeah, that sounds great. Fantastic.
And so then the other piece of this question is...
Lanyard on, lanyard off. Did you figure it out?
You're always on. Come on. Woo! It's not stage.
Is there the monitor, your computer monitor, is there just a little power button? Awesome. Now we are so good.
So good.
Now you're shiny.
So
I'm always shiny. That's my problem.
The other piece of the question is, putting aside the kind of magic wand scenario, let's just say that, hey, you have to report on this in the next couple of days. You're telling me right now, hey, I need the surveys to go out today. I need you to get quick responses. I need you to get back to me with a one-pager. And again, we don't want to lead you here. So
Yeah.
like, what off the top of your head, like what's in that one pager that's like the bare minimum that you need to communicate?
Yeah, if I thought had to communicate this up to provide some sort of justification, it would probably be number of people that are involved in coaching, number of people on my team, hours that they've completed coaching or level of participation, and then probably a couple of bulleted qualitative comments that, either feedback from them in short, sort of anonymous form.
Okay.
If I had to think, like if I needed to present this up to my VP, like tomorrow for a very high level meeting,
exactly.
that's
okay,
it.
that's
Yep.
perfect.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, we'd love, of course, to expand our coaching engagement
Yeah.
here. So anything that you think could, tell that story well, let us know.
It will be interesting down the line as we continue with this to figure out how do we measure success with it, because I think, in one way we could say there is a piece of this that is just an amenity, that it's a nice thing to do and that it's beneficial in a very vague way. But I think really what we'll probably figure out over time is, what is the value of coaching? What is the value to our unique organization? What is it to each of these individuals who participated in it? And how do we figure out how to measure that over time?
And what is are you rolling?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and what does your gut instinct say about what is it that is the value of coaching that we can say this is what success looks like and this is why we want to continue to do it, and it's not just an amenity.
I mean, it may be a little abstract to consider it, but I think that one of the key things that we'll look at is that at leaders at this level, it's probably something that's particularly important for leaders at this level is developing your emotional intelligence, so your understanding of yourself. And I think that's one of the things that professional coaching does so well, is that you have this unique experience with a person who's just dealing with you individually. And you work on the things that your coach and the individual are discovering together to help move forward. And you're really, for the most of the people that I've had involved in it so far, they've been talking about situations of that coach helping to unravel a particularly challenging personal issue with the way that they have approached leadership that they may not have even been entirely able to articulate themselves, but they are very aware of it, and the coaches are helping them find their way through those things.
Wonderful. Can I go into
Absolutely.
So kind of have a series of questions, and it's mostly kind of your journey through the coaching process to give whoever's watching this a sense of what's your experience. And you jump in with any questions along the way. So essentially, when you were thinking about getting coaching, when this came up as an idea, what problems or issues did you identify? Like, what prompted you at the beginning to even consider coaching?
I think the way that we came to coaching was that we had been doing work for a number of years around employee development at all levels within the organization. We started off focusing on a lot of frontline people. We started working on building career ladders, a lot of developmental things. But we were able to identify pretty quickly that this group at the top needed supports that were more unique to them individually and were also distinctly different than the rest of the group. That they had access to a lot more resources in terms of training and development, but they had specialized needs that weren't really being met by a lot of the other general programs that we were doing.
Okay. And so what made you zero in on coaching? Or actually, before you get into coaching, what are some other ways that you tried to solve this?
Well, we had in recent years developed a leadership development team meeting. It was a group of all the managers collectively together. We worked on sort of concrete skills they could build around communication, performance management, building career ladders for staff, treating staff with empathy, finding those topics that seemed to speak to the larger group. But even in that, these senior leaders that we pulled out, they either had these skills or they had a different approach to it that was, it was not really being met in these larger group forums. We did start working on just a small team meeting with the senior leaders, which I thought actually helped address this in a more specific way, but it still was evident that they have individual things. They were all at different places in their professional development. And that was, I think, probably the thing in the end, is that I had a large core of managers who were all in about the same place developmentally. Then these leaders that were in a smaller group but in a bigger range. You know, you had relatively new director level leaders, but you also had some pretty advanced managers and leaders with years and years of experience. So they had a pretty broad range, even in this small group of directors and managers.
Okay. And then how did you zero in on coaching?
I had a friend who does coaching, and he blah, blah, blah about it all the time. No. I had been considering coaching myself for a while. I've had other friends here at the institution who've had coaches, and they really spoke to what the benefit was to them individually. I suppose selfishly there was a part of me that was really looking for a way that I could do it for myself too. But other people had talked to me about the value that they'd had from having these coaching experiences. And it seemed like this was at least an opportunity where we could bring in a support that was something that we weren't doing and try it out in a way that we weren't really sure what the results would be.
And actually, I should have asked at the beginning, what's your name, your role, what do you do here, what? We'll do editing around
of
this.
Of course, yeah. My name is Jim Smith. I'm the department manager for parking, reception, and commuter services at Boston Children's Hospital.
Okay. And in that capacity,
I oversee about 150 employees, a dozen managers, and 5 different departments, and we run a 24/7 parking and commuter services operation with reception for Boston Children's Hospital.
Great. And so, we've been going through how you got to coaching. So, when you began to look at coaching, how did you define who would get coaching? What was the process by which you began to engage? Or
yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, I think that this group identified itself really. When I looked at the sort of hierarchy of my team, we were addressing a lot of the needs at some of the middle supervisor, middle manager level things, but this group was outside of that. And there was 5 or 6 people that were at a senior level that were managing other managers. They were managing whole departments. They had more complex jobs, and they were also developmentally in a different place too than a person who was relatively new in their job as a manager.
So then how did you then end up working with ACE-UP, and what was that setup process like?
Well, I have to say we didn't look at a lot of other companies. It was pretty direct. I had someone I knew who worked for ACE-UP. I asked a little bit about it to get some general information. They came back with proposals on it. I worked with VP&E to partner together with Boston Children's Hospital to come to an arrangement about what we wanted to achieve from it and how we would fund it. And the process came together pretty quickly.
And what were you looking for when you first started? I mean, you said you kind of went in not knowing individuals, etc. But as you got into it, what were you anticipating? What were you thinking? How did the journey begin?
How did the journey begin? I think when we went into it, I was probably thinking that we would be working on some more hard skills, that it was probably going to quickly figure out as a team even that the things that we needed to work on were communication, delegation, strategic vision, those types of things. I didn't entirely expect, and I probably should have, that it would be a lot more personalized, that because we were working individually with our own coaches that we chose, we started to work very specifically on the things that were important to each of us, wherever we were at in that developmental process. So it was less of a, these are the things that I want to achieve. Even though I kind of went into it with this idea that these are the things I want to achieve, what you find is these are the things that we're going to end up working on because of what end up being the most important things to work on.
And then from more of a tactical point of view, this can help with process. I mean, I'll just be transparent, however, but a lot of times we find with our engagements, some companies, like, their employees get on board right away and it's exciting, they move on. Others, they struggle. So you had a really strong engagement from the start, and I'm curious, did you experience any obstacles as you began to roll it out? If so, how did you overcome them? Like, what made for you what I think was a smooth process? You can tell me if it wasn't or not, but what was your process like? What made it work?
Well, I do think that what played to our advantage was that we had done on a good amount of time in advance working on other things. We had been building a lot of these skills in a fundamental way. We had been doing the leadership development team meetings for a while on our own. We had been kind of priming the pump. And when it came to the point where we decided that we wanted to bring in coaching as an option for a select group of people, they were already in that mindset of development. And that, I think, helped them easily transition into working with a coach. I will absolutely say every single one of them has said they weren't sure what to expect, and they weren't sure what it would be like. None of them had any experience with working with a coach. So I think for some of them, there was a bit of nervousness about what would be expected, what it would require of them. I think that was probably the biggest things up front, was they weren't really sure what to expect, and they weren't really sure what it was going to require. But I think we had a really good kickoff meeting here, and I think we were very generous with it's very open. You're not going to do this wrong. As long as you're participating in it, it's going to work out. And allowed them to work on any of the things that they wanted to work on personally. So that helped a lot.
So following up on that, and again, this is from my perspective, but one thing that really stood out to me in the experience of kind of onboarding the different leaders here was that there seemed to be a really strong internal communication going on about, hey, what this engagement is all about, what coaching could be used for, all the way down to like understanding exactly how you would consume the ASUP coaching. So my question is, what did you and the other kind of decision makers here at VPNE and Children's do to create that? Were you very intentional about that? Is that just kind of the culture that you have in place when there's a new initiative?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that we did have some good meetings in advance with both of you, and met with the VPNE team and talked to the leadership about what we were hoping to get out of coaching. Which honestly, when we left that first meeting with the two of you, with the senior leadership team at VPNE and Children's, our conversation right afterwards was we hadn't really thought through about what we hoped to get out of coaching. We went into it with a sort of broad perspective of this could be beneficial, but when we actually sat with you and started to unpack, what it is we're hoping to try and get out of it, I think the two things that came up were we weren't entirely sure what we were looking for, but we were entirely confident that this would be beneficial. And a lot of that has been the coaching experience, I think, for every single person who's been involved in it with our team, is that we've gone into it with this perspective of, I'm not entirely sure what it is that I'm going to be working on here, but quickly get to, this is beneficial. I understand and I see and I feel why this is beneficial to me and to the organization.
And so what are the benefits that you've been experiencing?
I think it's the practical things of working with a coach. I mean, one of the things we worked on right away was helping to define from me what my priorities and my values were, because they were things that, working and being a busy professional, it's these run through your head, as you're working and running around all the time, but you don't really take the opportunity to sit down, write them out, think about them, talk about them, consider them, and then start to apply them to the way that you're working. So a real intentionality happened that I hadn't anticipated.
What are some of the benefits?
Yeah. Thanks. Just gonna check the setting and grab that if you needed it.
I don't, but I can turn it down.
As he's working on that, did you communicate to I'm just really curious about this for our own learning. Did you communicate to each individual user about, like, did you have like one-on-ones with each person who would eventually become a coachee to kind of get them onboarded, or was it like group meetings, group calls?
I think there was, I think there was two things that were happening. One was that, I have regular meetings with all these guys.
Okay.
So, we had, except for one who doesn't directly report for me, so we had been talking about it in a general way. And
Okay.
because I have regular meetings with them too, I have been talking with them all over a period of time about where they're at developmentally, what are the things they're working on,
Okay.
what can we help with. And then as we got close to where we launched, we did all meet in advance and just talk sort of generally about this is what we're going to do. I think part of that was also to give them the opportunity to ask any questions, like if they felt anxious about it or if they had questions about it. And they just acknowledged that I think the biggest concern people had was the amount of time it might require of them, which I really don't think is, in the end, a big
Okay.
demand. I think for busy people, you have that perspective when anything new comes along, feeling like I don't have time for one more thing.
Yeah, understood. Do you feel like it was critical to have that meeting? It sounds like there was that one meeting that didn't involve James, right, or any other ASUP staff, where it was just you all kind of sitting down and discussing this.
Yeah, I think if you're going to introduce anything new or make any big change, I think it's always beneficial to step those things out in process. The more advance notice people have, the more they can feel comfortable with the transition, but it also allows me the opportunity to understand what those concerns might be so I can address them effectively going into it and not start off immediately trying to do problem resolution.
Thank you.
So if you were talking to somebody like you in another organization and they were just going through the process, what would you say are the key things that you in your role most effectively worked with the two would do?
I would consider what we've been doing in advance first in terms of development for staff to make sure that we had a good plan and that this fit in with our plan about where they're growing and where they're moving to. I would try and meet with them individually and as a group informally just to try and identify some of those things up front that may be a concern for them that I may not be really aware of either, but also provide them the opportunity to ask questions about it so they don't feel like they're totally cold going into it. We shared around the ASUP website info so they could also explore a little bit on their own, get to see a little bit more about what the company was about and what coaching might look like. So I think that also helped create a layer of comfort for them going into it so that when we actually had our launch meeting, they felt prepared going into it and felt confident that this was a positive change for them.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Should I keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. So you talked about some of the benefits that you're experiencing. What are some of the benefits you see coming from everyone who's now getting coached? What are some unexpected things that you're seeing or expected or?
Well, we did have a manager quit. So I think, I'm just going to snag my foot here. It's hard to say because at this point, we're relatively early on still. The coaching has all been anonymous, so I have no idea what any of these managers have been talking about with their coaches. They could all be plotting to overthrow me at this point, and I wouldn't know that. But I think that, what I'm hearing in my one-on-ones has been a lot of people helping to understand, their own professional direction that they weren't really entirely clear on, that they might have had a general understanding about what they're working on, where they're going, but they hadn't really been able to kind of gel it into a clear vision. And I think that for most of them, it seems like coaching is helping to solidify some of that. I think they've all spoken about personal challenges that they're having that coaching is helping to address. Individual things that either are directly related to the way they lead or just their feelings about their own emotional intelligence, their professional development, their personal development that coaching is helping to support.
And if you continued with the coaching and you keep working with